Hi everyone, welcome. Just so you know, we're still getting things set up. We are going to have an Excel sheet where you're going to be able to see the lottery results getting updated as we're doing the selections, and we're going to be sharing that as well. So give us just a few minutes, please. I just want to. Let's see if we'll pop up over there. All right. Welcome everyone to the 28 South Street and 115 Thurston affordable homeownership lottery. There we go. Now I can see myself. Welcome everyone. First I'll do some introductions quickly. We have right here Nisa Musenge, who is our administrative assistant for housing, and is going to be doing our lottery selections. So thank you so much for being here. We also have Shannon Lawler, who is our fair housing and inclusionary specialist, who is going to be doing the lottery results on the spreadsheet you see in front of you, as well as our program manager, Alana Gaffney, who is going to be answering any questions in chat. So please, if you do have any questions, feel free to put those in chat. We may be answering some of the questions out loud, but we'll also be, if it seems like folks should hear it, but we'll also be answering questions in chat during the lottery. So yeah, and please refrain from unmuting during the lottery itself. We will take questions again if you want to unmute and ask a question at the end of the lottery. But we're expecting this one to take a little longer than usual. We have quite a few applicants, and we have 4 different pools we're going to be selecting. Somerville preference and no preference, actually, for 4 different units. So that being said, I just want to quickly go over the unique ID. So if you were found eligible for the units that you were applying for, then you would have received a unique ID. And I'll just quickly hold one of those up to the camera and explain what it means. And again, those were emailed out yesterday. So the unique IDs look a little bit something like this. They're a little bit longer than usual, but I'll quickly explain what it means. So if you look at the first number right here is actually unique to your application. So there's actually one person that has 1 and has Somerville preference, and there's one person that has a 1 and has no preference. So there's 2 ones out there. Only one of them is going to be on a green slip. The other one's going to be on a pink slip. And you can see 1 and then 80 is the income tier. So it's either 80 or 110. S in this case refers to South Street. So if you applied to just South Street, you'll have an S. If you applied to just Thurston, you'll have a T. And if you applied to both, there will be a B right here. SP means Somerville preference. It's either SP or NP. And then lastly, 1 in this case refers to a 1-bedroom unit. So you'll either have a 1, a 2, or a 1, 2, which means you applied for both types of units. Something else to keep in mind, we're not going to be sending out individual placements to all households. We do reach out within 24 hours to the people selected first in each pool. So we reach out with an invitation to certify for the unit. That means if you have not heard back from us by tomorrow afternoon, essentially, it will mean that you were not selected first. Does not necessarily mean that the first household on each list will be eligible, but again, we prefer if you can refrain from sort of reaching out to us proactively about your placement. We will post the lottery results. This video will go up on YouTube, the recording of this meeting, and we'll also have the waitlist posted on the Inclusionary webpage, which is Inclusionary at Somerville. It's on actually, the website is escaping me right now, but we can post it in the chat. And I think that's everything I wanted to go over. The last thing, actually, just the order in which we're going to be doing the selections. So we're going to start off with the 28 South Street. We'll do the 1-bedroom, the 2-bedroom at 80%, and then the 2-bedroom at 110%. Then we'll do 115 Thurston. And each of the pools are going to be selected separately. So what that means is that first off, we'll select Somerville preference, and then we'll select no preference. And for those of you who don't know, what that means is that people that do have Somerville preference are placed on the wait list ahead of those with no preference. So we'll start off with the Somerville preference. That creates the first portion of the wait list, and then the no preference completes the wait list. So without further ado, we'll go ahead, and this is going to be the selection process for the 1-bedroom at 80% AMI at 28 South Street. And we'll start off with, great. So I'm going to be holding up each of these numbers. I'm not going to hold it up for too long. I'm going to make it pretty quick because, again, this is going to be a longer lottery. So it's just going to be just a moment holding up each of the numbers that's going into the lottery wheel right here. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in chat. All right. So selection number one for the one bedroom at 28 South is Somerville preference number one. Selection number two is Somerville preference 48. Selection number three is Somerville preference 13. Selection number four is Somerville preference 2. Selection number five is Somerville preference 43. Selection six is Somerville preference 17. Selection seven is Somerville preference 34. Selection eight is Somerville preference 41. Selection nine is Somerville preference 15. Selection 10 is Somerville preference 16. Selection 11 is Somerville preference 33. I don't think we need to spend one. Selection 12 is Somerville preference 49. Selection 13 is Somerville preference 36. Selection 14 is Somerville preference 19. Selection 15 is Somerville preference 47. Selection 16 is Somerville preference 27. Selection 17 is Somerville preference 8. Selection 18. Selection 18 is Somerville preference 37. Selection 19 is Somerville preference 3. Selection 20 is Somerville preference 39. Selection 21 is Somerville preference 35. Selection 22 is Somerville preference 45. Selection 23, Somerville preference 6. Selection 24, Somerville preference 9. Selection 25 is Somerville preference 29. Selection 26 is Somerville preference 42. And selection 27 is Somerville preference 46. All right, now we'll be doing the non-preference pool for the also for the one bedroom at 80% AMI. Okay, this goes open like that. Is that okay? Yeah. All right, so selection one, which is also overall number 28 on the wait list, is no preference 22. Number 29 is no preference 27. Selection 30 is no preference 41. Selection 31 is no preference 35. Selection 32 is no preference 20. Selection 33 is no preference 37. Selection 34 is no preference 39. Selection 35 is no preference 26. Selection 36 is no preference 16. Selection 37 is no preference 28. Selection 38 is no preference 42. Selection 39 is no preference 29. Selection 40 is no preference 1. Selection 41 is no preference 5. Selection 42 is no preference 31. Selection 43 is no preference 24. Selection 44 is no preference 40. Selection 45 is no preference 32. Selection 46 is no preference 2. Selection 47 is no preference 6. Selection 48 is no preference 23. And selection 49 is no preference 15. All right. I see we have a couple questions in the chat, and we'll probably be able to answer those while we're filling the lottery wheel for the next pool. So just hang with us. The next pool we're going to be doing is going to be for the 2-bedroom at 80% AMI at 28 South Street. So again, this will be separate from the 115 Thurston Street selection. So this is the 2-bedroom at 80% AMI at 28 South. Starting with the Somerville preference pool. All right, so selection number one for the two-bedroom 80% AMI unit at 28 South is Somerville Preference 30. Selection number two is Somerville Preference 39. Selection three is Somerville Preference 49. Selection four is Somerville Preference 12. Selection five is Somerville Preference 14. Selection six is Somerville Preference 46. Selection seven is Somerville Preference 45. Selection eight is Somerville Preference 42. Selection nine is Somerville Preference 17. Selection 10 is Somerville Preference 5. Selection 11 is Somerville Preference 22. Selection 12 is Somerville Preference 32. Selection 13 is Somerville Preference 8. Selection 14 is Somerville Preference 48. Selection 15 is Somerville Preference 7. Selection 16 is Somerville Preference 38. Selection 17 is Somerville Preference 25. Selection 18 is Somerville Preference 31. Selection 19 is Somerville Preference 35. Selection 20 is Somerville Preference 47. Selection 21 is Somerville Preference 21. Selection 22 is Somerville Preference 24. And selection 23 is Somerville Preference 10. We'll move on to the no preference pool for the same unit, the two-bedroom at 28 South. Yeah, thank you. All right. Selection number one, no preference. Also 24 overall is no preference 10. Selection 25 is no preference 25. Selection 26 is no preference 11. Selection 27 is no preference 40. Selection 28 is no preference 20. Selection 29 is no preference 3. Selection 30 is no preference 42. Selection 31 is no preference 33. Selection 32 is no preference 4. Selection 33 is no preference 19. Selection 34 is no preference 8. Selection 35 is no preference 12. Selection 36 is no preference 17. Selection 37 is no preference 41. Selection 38 is no preference 7. Selection 39 is no preference 34. Selection 40 is no preference 30. Selection 41 is no preference 39. Selection 42 is no preference 21. Selection 43 is no preference 18. All right, so that concludes the 2-bedroom at 80% AMI for 28 South. Next, we're going to be doing the 2-bedroom at 110%, also at 28 South. Starting with the Somerville preference pool. This one will be a little quicker. All right, selection number one for the two bedroom at 110% AMI is Somerville Preference 50. Selection number two is Somerville Preference 51. Selection number three is Somerville Preference 40. Selection number four is Somerville Preference 18. Selection number five is Somerville Preference 28. Selection six is Somerville Preference 44. Selection seven is Somerville Preference 20. Selection eight is Somerville Preference 52. Selection nine is Somerville Preference 11. Selection 10 is Somerville Preference 23. Selection 11 is Somerville Preference 53. And here is the non-preference pool for that two bedroom 110% AMI unit. All right, no preference number one, and also number 12 overall is no preference 36. Selection 13 and is no preference 43. Selection 14 is no preference 9. Selection 15 is no preference 14. Selection 16 is no preference 46. Selection 17 is no preference 13. Selection 18 is no preference 38. Selection 19 is no preference 44. Selection 20 is no preference 45. All right, the last pool that we'll be doing is for the two bedroom 80% AMI unit at 115 Thurston Street. Starting with the Somerville preference. All right. First selection for the 2-bedroom at 115 Thurston is Somerville preference 24. Selection number 2 is Somerville preference 10. Selection 3 is Somerville preference 47. Selection 4 is Somerville preference 48. Selection 5 is Somerville preference 7. Selection 6 is Somerville preference 8. Selection 7 is Somerville preference 42. Selection 8 is Somerville preference 14. Selection 9 is Somerville preference 31. Selection 10 is Somerville preference 4. Selection 11 is Somerville preference 25. Selection 12 is Somerville preference 38. Selection 13 is Somerville preference 35. Selection 14 is Somerville preference 12. Selection 15 is Somerville preference 17. Selection 16 is Somerville preference 45. Selection 17 is, I got two here. Selection 17 is Somerville preference 21. Selection 18 is Somerville preference 39. Selection 19 is Somerville preference 22. Selection 20 is Somerville preference 49. Selection 21 is Somerville preference 46. Selection 22 is Somerville preference 5. All right, and last we have the non-preference pool for the 115 Thurston 2-bedroom unit. All right, selection number 1 for no preference is also 23 overall, is no preference 4. Selection 24 is no preference 39. Selection 25 is no preference 18. Selection 26 is no preference 19. Selection 27 is no preference 41. Selection 28 is no preference 3. Selection 29 is no preference 1. Oh, I'm sorry. No preference 11. Selection 30 is no preference 10. Selection 31 is no preference 7. Selection 32 is no preference 17. Selection 33 is no preference 25. Selection 34 is no preference 42. Selection 35 is no preference 21. Selection 36 is no preference 20. Selection 37 is no preference 8. Selection 38 is no preference 33. Selection 39 is no preference 40. And selection 40 is no preference 12. All right, we made it in before noon. So that concludes the selections for all of the 4 units for today. Once again, we're going to be reaching out to those 4 households that were at the top of each wait list within the next 24 hours. So you'll hear from us by tomorrow afternoon. And once again, we'll also post our wait lists. They'll go up on the website, which is SomervilleMA.gov/inclusionary. We can put that in the chat. We also, if you want to contact us, you can reach out inclusionary@SomervilleMA.gov. But we do ask that you don't reach out about your waitlist placement for the time being, because again, we're reaching out to those top households. Waitlists will be posted, and we probably won't have any other information for you before we end up posting those waitlists in a week. So that being said, we're going to be taking a look at chat, seeing if there are any questions. At this point, you could raise your hand and we can unmute you if you have a question that you'd like to unmute and ask as well. But that is the selection for today. All right, I do it looks like there are a couple questions that were directed to me, so apologies that I could not answer those during the lottery. One is, if you had to leave or someone is unable to attend the lottery, that does not mean they can't be selected, they can't win the lottery. You do not need to attend in order to participate. Someone else asked, they said there's a lottery entry that has the same number, unique identifier, but it's NP instead of SP. So yes, those are 2 different people. The SP identifier would have been selected before the NP household, and so the person with SP, 10 SP will be on the wait list ahead of 10 NP. And those are two different households. Yes, we have those waitlist results open for 28 South, so please feel free to take a look at those. And there was a question, when will you be notified if the first household does not continue? That's really hard to know. It is possible that the first household will drop out, that the first household could not be eligible. We have to do an eligibility certification is going to be the next step. We're going to reach out to each of those households to start with that, but that we don't know how long it could take to determine that a household is not eligible. So it could be a week, it could be a month. Really, we're not totally sure at this point. If you are in fifth place, it looks like somebody asked that question. So at this point, I would just hold on for now. There's a good chance that we'll not be reaching out to you anytime soon. Because again, we have to reach out to the first 4 households first, starting with the first household. If we get to the second, etc. So I would really not anticipate to hear from us anytime soon. Oh, and it looks like somebody wanted to see, okay, you have the no preference ones up. Somebody's asking about the chances of getting a home if you're non-preference. We had a good amount of applications for each of these units, so I wouldn't say it's very likely for this opportunity that we would get to the non-preference pool. It is possible. I think particularly for the 110% AMI unit at 28 South, that's a shorter wait list. So there's more of a chance that we would wind up there. But generally, I think we would anticipate that there would be a buyer in the Somerville preference pool for this opportunity. All right, we'll give it just another minute or two. Again, our email is in the chat. So Alana Gaffney posted that in the chat. So if you do want to get in touch with us, that's the best way. You can also call us as well, but we're more likely to have a quick response to an email just based on who's in the office and phone access. Does 115 have parking? Does have it? I believe it does have one deeded parking space. Yes. And just so you know, for all of the affordable unit owners, you will have the option. You can get a waiver for a parking permit, even if parking is not otherwise allowed at the property. So there will be a street parking option. By virtue of residing in an affordable unit, you can get that waiver approved. But I believe there's one deeded parking space at 150 Thurston, and the 2-bedroom 80% AMI unit, I believe, is the other unit with deeded parking. So there's just one of those units at 28 South. So again, please, if you do have any other follow-up questions, email them to us, inclusionary@SomervilleMA.gov, and we are going to end the meeting now. Thanks so much for attending. Thanks for all of the interest. And if you didn't win, please, consider also applying for other opportunities on our website, on the Inclusionary website. You'll be able to sign up for notifications if you don't get those already. And that's all for this lottery. Thanks very much.